So briefly, I'll tell you what is this about, because I have very limited time and lots of materials. So first thing, I will tell you what is my opinion on persuasion. Then we will deal with meta representation of the metaphor, because it's very important if we want to structure the differences between the same metaphor, or basically the same. And then I will tell you about variations, which comes with the same, they basically come with the same verbal phrase, but alterations are motivated by images mostly. And then I conclude on structures of beliefs and personal values. So first of all, I have to say that I was a contributor to the volume on persuasion. And the editor's position, which I now represent, was that persuasive message attempts to change, modify, or coordinate the addressee's system of beliefs, values, attitudes, and behaviors. Persuasion does not necessarily alter a person's political preferences. It is also about strengthening, reconfirming the person's existing belief. And that's what it will be about here. I usually do not run any experiments or surveys. What I'm dealing with is with virtual dialogue, dialogue which displayed somewhere in social media or in mass media. And then the case study which I'm offering here, it's a metaphoric message or propaganda slogan which sounds this way: Russia is rising from her knees. And this metaphor is not novel, or this metaphoric story is not novel. It was introduced by Yeltsin in 1991, and then later Putin or Putin supporters started reusing it after 2004 and his Munich speech. Although I couldn't find anywhere that Putin personally uses this slogan. So we're dealing with so-called slogans. It's sort of like a catchy phrase and memorable phrase. It's used like a propaganda message, which is information, especially of information of biased or misleading, often of misleading nature, used to promote a political cause or point of view. And what we can see here with this sort of, it's a short metaphoric story. It's the dramatic representation of simplistic conclusions. And given that Kathleen was talking about novel and conventional metaphors, this is not a novel slogan, and it's not by any means, it's not some sort of novel creation. And it resonates in many other slogans, like similar, we will make America great again by Donald Trump, very close. We can choose to be a country that's back on its feet and striding forward, Cameron. People of Spain prefer to die on their feet than to live on their knees, Dolores Ebaruri. And I'd rather die on my feet than live on my knees, Emiliano Zapata. And by both, so there are different variations of similar theme. What I'm dealing, so basically, how I selected this particular case study. It was because once I saw on Facebook, one of my friends posted a film which was named Russia is Rising from Her Knees. And that was a very sort of dramatic cartoons. They were dramatic cartoons. It's some sort of beautiful woman in a Russian traditional costume is married to some sort of freak midget, and you can see some politician behind this image. And he put her into the dungeon and persistently rapes her. So she is on her knees, and he made her to stand up and then put on her knees again. So that was Russia is raising from her knees. So I decided to look more extensively at what sort of variations we can see with this slogan, and I just used Google search, and it came many discussion groups there were. And there were many verbal sort of stories which extended messages. But for this particular presentation, I chose memes, which is an image and some verbal message attached to this. And so basically what was there, it was a multimodal metaphor. It's visual and verbal means of communication. And if you want to unpackage it and to present it on meta level, so I tried to use Kovacic extended conceptual metaphor theory, because there are different levels of generalizations and there are different concepts blended together. It's a very complex, even short phrase. It's very difficult for interpretation and very difficult to interpret and difficult to see assumptions that are lying under sort of underpinning assumptions. So Kovacic in his new book, he says that first verbal message invokes a schema. And schemas, there are two schemas probably involved here. It's vertical orientation and source path goal. It could be interpreted as a journey metaphor, but it's just as a journey from the low position to upper position. Then on the level of domains, we have also many different metaphors, and maybe I'm wrong, so it's just a first attempt to interpret it. It's body experience, social experience, or body, it's politics. Vertical position is good, purposeful activity is self-propelled movement, changes are motions, difficulties, impediments to motions, and progress, it's distance covered. And this is the distance from low position to the high position. Then it's more specific. So this is a very high level of generality, and then there is a more specific level which Kovacic called frames, and it's not actually coincides with our traditional view on discourse framing. So we have it's again, I'm struggling a bit with this mode of interpretation, but I try to do my best. So state is a person, there is a leg movement involved, it's an upward body movement, and kneeling position is not comfortable, the person is vulnerable. Moving to, you can see that knees are turning. So further specification, so far we were dealing with offline meaning construction. Now there are lots of specific information added to that on the level of mental spaces. And that's where my images make the difference. Images sort of alters the verbal message. So first of thing, we have to look, who is the person, how he is represented or she is represented, in which social situation, because kneeling in a different situation could be considered as a different process, because if it's a punishment for child is one thing, that execution of a prisoner is another thing. Could be sports, could be shooting or praying, also kneeling position. So this is more specific information, and they alter our sort of generic version of the story. They change dramatically. Now, I look how people can manipulate with the image, and if this persuasive image is the one which meant to strengthen the person's existing beliefs, then how these beliefs have been shaped in the image. So there are two big groups of message recipients, and because the exchange of the images, we can see that one group which believes in positive changes in Russia, and they believe in good leadership, and another group which doesn't believe in positive changes, but they use the same verbal message, and they, of course, they reject any possibility of positive changes in the future. So structural, if we consider structural elements of the image, we can see that Russia is personified, it's anthropomorphism. It can be represented as a woman, man and woman, so men and women, graphs, it's a corpse, a jade, a bear. So there are different possibilities. Say, man could be drunkard, woman can be beauty or an old woman. So there are different characterization frames attached to that. Then rising, what is the positions signaling this rising? It's low dog position, it's like in yoga, on all fours, squatting, kneeling, piling bills. So bills or some papers make shapes that they're growing, crawling, a full plank position, standing on one knee, lunging. So knees, what can they signal that person is on knees? It's uncomfortable position on the knees. It can be an involuntary position or voluntary position on the knees. So this is a basic line of variations what we have. And if we put it in basic correspondences, it's really hard to show the target domain without using of metaphor. So this is a person, and the person represents states or a state or nation. Then there is some temporality involved, which is also difficult to represent when we look at the traditional forms of metaphoric representation in the conceptual metaphor theory or extended conceptual metaphor theory. So the person lost in upright position, possible villains were involved who pushed the person. So that corresponds maybe to the country went through a difficult time. Some people did something bad and had an effect on the state as a whole. Some tragic event like war, crisis happened. At present time, so still kneeling position, uncomfortable, involuntary, weak, and the nation can feel disgrace, shame, weakness, fatigue. In perspectives, originally what was signaling us returning to an upright position, moving forward, and possible helpers are involved. Gaining strength, acquiring power, moving toward a better future. So now, how can be represented? Now I have very short time, I'll just show you images and go to conclusion. So as we can see, there are flattering so-called faces. There are only two faces I can see here. It's a popular actor, but he is on kneeling position, but on kneeling position because he is doing laces of his combat shoes. So he is ready to fight. It's not an involuntary position. Then we can see Maria Sharapova after winning her Australia Open championship. And tennis players often standing, they are kneeling just as a sign of happiness or gratitude to the audience and disbelief. So kneeling position is not that uncomfortable. Then goalkeeper. So he is kneeling just to defend to defend the goal, to defend the gate, and he is succeeding in that. So then, okay, nice woman, but it's not so flattering overall image. There are lots of images of soldiers, and they are kneeling because they are shooting or because they are doing their shoelaces. Now, unflattering. We can see a sort of prostitute, then we can see blended image an old woman, and we can see drunkard, we can see beer. Then we can see someone like a jade who is not a woman, not a man. There is a collective images of sort of gullible Russians who invested their money in some shady enterprise and lost their money, and then they are kneeling in front of Putin. This is a Graaf when prices are rising and person have to stand up, but eventually he will fall down. So a positive outcome is linked to the social situatedness in which the kneeling occurs. So if it's a voluntary position, if it's something that afterwards you're ready for attack or defend movement, it's okay. Then negative outcome can be considered, and we can see that the drunkard, though he's on all fours, it's not long that he will be, his knees will be their knees not on the ground. So the same jades. Then you can see that there is an addition to the basic frames, villains and helpers, so-called helpers. And I have to go to conclusion quickly. So understanding multimodal metaphoric message requires a familiarization with socio-cultural situatedness of the body experience. The message can be manipulated and become ironic via use of prototypes of body experience related to different socio-cultural contexts. Complications of the basic scene, introduction of other actors and scenario also can alter the message. Blending different prototypical scenes, praying and riding, piling and climbing, also can manipulate the basic message. So understanding of metaphoric stories also requires a consideration of temporal causal aspects which have not been sufficiently discussed before. Persuasive impact of the very apt message, and this is an apt message, can be understood as a resonance that was evoked by the metaphoric theme and was represented by multiple variations. And the persuasive impact transpired in a multi-layered interdialogic pattern. It's about strengthening, reconfirming the person's existing beliefs. Well, and that's about it.